Okay everybody, this is part 2 of my video response to Adam Nichols' thread where he wanted us to answer some questions on the Beatles White Album and with the Beatles. So please watch part 1. I answered a few questions there and I'm going to continue now. Next question. What is my favorite side of the Beatles White Album and why? That's a real hard one to answer. A lot of them are hard when it comes to the Beatles and when you love the Beatles, but right now I'd say probably either side 1 or side 3. Both of them are solid all the way through. But I think right now I'd go with side 3. I mean, I just love the way it starts out with a bang with Birthday, goes into John's Rockin' Your Blues, and you know, we calm down for Paul's Mother Nature's Son and blah blah, when we go on, and then finally it culminates in a crescendo at the end after Sexy Sadie with Helter Skelter, which blows the roof off of the house. And I like the closing song on the album side, George's Long Long Long, which a lot of people are down on, but I think it's really nice and a nice mellow, let's calm down feeling after Helter Skelter. So I'll go with side 3 as my favorite White Album side. Are you a fan of double LPs, and is this a good one? Well, it depends, you know, it depends on the music. To me, from a lot of the double LPs that I have in my collection or that I've heard one way or another, there's a lot of filler on those albums to me. Some people who are not Beatles hardcore fanatics may say that the Beatles White Album has a lot of filler on there. I don't agree personally. But I mean, something like Fleetwood Mac's Tusk, I mean, there's a lot of filler on there in my opinion. Even something as great as Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, to me, has some filler on it. It's still a great album. So I think when it comes down to the Beatles White Album, it's the best that I've heard of double albums. Pink Floyd's The Wall is also good, a good multi-disc album. But you know, a lot of people, the Beatles themselves and George Martin, the producer, said you know, they think maybe that the White Album should have been kind of narrowed down to one really strong single album instead of a double album. I don't agree with that at all. I've always agreed with Paul McCartney on this one. In the Beatles Anthology, Paul says, you know, I think that part of what is good about it is that there are so many different styles on it, so many interesting things on it. And he goes, it was great, it sold, it's the bloody Beatles White Album. Shut up, he says, kidding around. And that's really how I feel. I've never thought anybody put it so much better. You know, come on. You know, should it have been this, should it have been that? Come on. I think the White Album wouldn't be the great masterpiece that it is if it was just a concise, regular album. If you want that, you had that with all their other albums, right? You know, most of the time, like something like Sgt. Pepper or Revolver or Rubber Soul, those are albums that are put there to be concise and planned out to every detail. The White Album is just anything goes, you know, carte blanche, hodgepodge of everything, which I think is great. Anyway, do I celebrate album anniversaries? No, I don't. I don't mean that I'm against it or anything. I just never give it much thought. I mean, you know, if it comes to mind, I might, but generally I don't think of it. Next question was, which of the two albums, the Beatles White Album or With the Beatles, do you prefer and why? Well, I love them both. You know, but With the Beatles is my favorite album of the UK by the Beatles, and I know Adam doesn't agree with that, and that's fine. A lot of people don't. I think I'm in a minority. I guess for me it's just that With the Beatles has a lot of songs on it that I grew up with when I was listening to the US versions, like the US albums Meet the Beatles and the Beatles' second album. Those two albums had a lot of songs that I would later discover when I got With the Beatles. So to me, I guess that's the way I look at it. To me, I didn't get to the UK albums till later in my life, and by the time I got to the UK albums, I noticed that With the Beatles had a lot of tracks on it that were featured on Meet the Beatles and the Beatles' second album in the US. So I also think, I mean, the cover is iconic. That's an iconic picture. That's an iconic cover. Now, you don't judge a book by its cover or an album by its cover, but to me, this is the Beatles at their peak of being hungry, young, raunchy rock and rollers, and this is when they were really starting to hit big in England and ready to explode on the US. It's the Beatles at Beatlemania just really beginning. That's really the best I can say about it, and I love so many of John's vocals on it. And it says, question, what's your favorite song from each album and why? Now, of course, that's very difficult to say. With the Beatles, you know, I like every song on it, but favorite song and least song, Adam wants to know. I can't really pick. The best I could do here, I'll cheat a little bit. I'll say, here are my favorite songs off this album. Money, that's what I want, because John has an amazing rock vocal on it. John really sounds like he really means every word of it. He really wants that money. I love John's vocal on it. Money is one of the most outrageously rocking songs they ever did. Don't Bother Me, I love that song. I think it's a great debut for George. It has a certain kind of weird sound to it that I like. Also in that vein, Not a Second Time is one of my favorite songs on the album. I just like John's vocals on there, and I like also the organ. It has like another very haunting kind of sound to it, moody sound to it. And I love Ringo's I Want to Be Your Man. I disagree with Adam, I'm sorry Adam, but I think Ringo's version is better. I like the Stones, and I like the Stones version too, but I just like Ringo a lot, and I really like the way they speed up the song a lot. Ringo really sounds like he's into it and rocking. You know, the Stones version to me is very kind of by the number, kind of repetitious. You know, it doesn't mean I don't like it, but I like Ringo's. But if I was going to pick one, I'll go with Not a Second Time as my favorite song. It's hard to say. Those are the ones I like the best. All My Loving is great too, but All My Loving is kind of overdone, you know. But it's a great classic. My least favorite song from With the Beatles, no question, Till There Was You, by Paul's vocal of the Music Man Broadway cover tune. Not that I don't like the song. I mean, Paul is suited for it, and it's nice and lovely and all that. But to me, if I had to pick one, it's my least favorite. It's the only blemish. I say blemish loosely. As I say, I enjoy it, but it's my least favorite song. On the White Album, again, it's very difficult. I narrowed it down to Dear Prudence, Your Blues, Savoy Truffle, I love, by George. While My Guitar Gently Weeps, but that's overplayed. And Helter Skelter, and those are probably my favorite songs. I'm going to go with Helter Skelter as number one. The reason? Because I just feel that it's the real one heavy metal, dirtiest, as Paul says, dirtiest, rockiest, ugliest thing we ever did, man. You know, when I try to tell people that the Beatles aren't all about Love Me Do and I Want to Hold Your Hand, Helter Skelter is something I play. I think it's the high point of this album. So that's my favorite song. Least favorite song, I could easily go with Revolution 9 because it's not really a song. It's just a lot of gibberish, but for what it is, it's okay. That's too easy. And picking stuff like, I'd next go with Wild Honey Pie because it's just a fragment, just a segue. I think that's kind of too easy. So I'm going to go with the song Honey Pie, the 1920s boppy style by Paul. Thanks, folks.